So welcome everyone to episode 126. I'm Craig Kiger with Minnesota DNR Outreach, and today we're going to talk about the upcoming deer season updates with Todd Froberg, and Grace Milanowski is going to talk about her work taking trail camera photos of orphle, the gut piles that are left into the woods. So with that, Todd, we'll turn it over to you and you can jump right into your presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Craig, and thanks for everybody, I guess, joining over the lunch hour, and Grace for joining and talk about the awful project. So we can jump right in, and we'll get to that at the end. So today, I guess we'll just talk about deer management in Minnesota, a little bit of overview, the long-term process, which is our goal setting process, and then the short-term. So an annual season setting basis of how those designations, or what you see hitting the regulations booklets, that is on the short term. Also just our deer season dates, so a reminder, and then what those bag limits are, and then some potential outlooks for regionally in Minnesota. Also we'll hit on a couple of the 2023 changes. So what you need to know for 2023 or what's new, and then CWD specifically related to regulation changes as well. And then, as I said, Grace will touch on the Awful Wildlife Watching Project at the end. All right, so first off, this is our long-term process. So deer population goals, and what are these population goals? So as you can see from the map on the right, we went through a goal setting process on a yearly basis within blocks. So I guess going counterclockwise around the state, starting earliest in the northwest portion of the state in 2020, and finally finishing this past year around the metro area and extending into the north central part. And these guide deer management over the next 10 years with a 5-year check-in, and are articulated as a desired direction and magnitude change for the next few years. So typically, an increase of 25 or 50% stable or decrease. And with these, deer management in general is a pretty blunt tool. We rely, heavily on hunter harvest. So typically these changes we're wanting them to go, slow. So it takes a while to maybe get to the desired direction or the change. Excuse me. And otherwise, specifically in certain regions of the state, we rely or are at the mercy of Mother Nature in some cases. So factors considered when making these population goals. Well, first, the first step is taking public input through randomized mail surveys, and these are what hunters identify as the DPA they hunt in, or landowners based on parcel size into subcategories, and then that input taken. So all of these things are weighed out through a couple different factors of age and gender and what they, I guess, hunters hunt. So we can pull some of those factors out, and then also, as I said, with landowners, parcel size, and then weighted based on survey responses. And also through this process, we're creating these draft goals based on the public input, those harvest trends or other biological data, winter severity in those predator populations, deer damage complaints or habitat considerations within these blocks. And then with that, those draft goals are presented, and then we open an online engagement or in-person engagement. So we had in-person meetings and online meetings, and also an open comment period to weigh in on how people felt about those draft goals and where they wanted to see them. So with all that input, we take that and see if we're way off on those draft goals, and if it seems to jive or does not jive with what the draft goal is, we either change that for the final goal or go with that for the final goal. And as I mentioned, for the final year of 2023. This was the two goal blocks that we were in, and this is where we ended up. Block 4 is the East Central Uplands, so those DPAs within there on the northern portion of this. And as you can see, those green portions where it's an increased 25, we've had some severe winters. There's, a different predator population, a bigger predator population or predator base there compared to, when we get to the southern or central part of the state. Increased 25 for those, and then transitioning down really into the farther southwest you go, or in that transition area, there's higher deer population, so a decrease of 25. And also to note, there's DPA 604 and DPA 605, which are CWD DPAs. So that also influences what these goals are and the potential disease concerns. And then the block 5 is a southern portion surrounding the 7-county metro area. And just in general, there is, a higher population, human density, and then also some areas of, pretty high intensive urban development. Some of these areas, suburban development. So creating deer refugia or habitat, pretty good habitat with, areas where they're not easily accessible to hunt in some cases. And then one big theme from this goal block in particular is the amount of specialty crop growers. So whether that's Christmas tree farmers or pumpkin growers, vegetable growers, apple trees, those types of things, do see some deer depredation complaints, and in some cases on smaller parcels or smaller properties where maybe it's not super conducive to hunting. So a very diverse group of perspectives coming in for deer management and trying to balance those things. So in total, so as I said, we completed this year, and we'll be revisiting these goals in the near term. So we have a year off, which is, we're thankful for that, but then those 5-year check-ins are going to start happening. So how we'll go about that, we're still developing some of those ideas, and then identifying where we're at with the goals. And just in general, this is the whole state and where we ended up for these deer population goals. You can see some common themes throughout this. In mostly, north central Minnesota, you see some of those green areas of increases, where we've had some particular hard winters. Winters affect deer in this area. There's also that predator base that I mentioned earlier, and then kind of in that central transition zone where there's quite a bit of red, so those decrease areas, we have lots of deer depredation issues, high or higher human population, so deer vehicle conflicts or human conflicts, and then just all around pretty good habitat with pretty high deer populations. And you can also, it doesn't tell, I guess, the whole story. For instance, if you look at the northeastern part of the state, where we really do have fairly low relatively deer densities, but we also have moose up there, and moose are a primary species of concern. So in the primary species of management in those areas, so we have those conflicting things where we need to balance moose and deer in those cases. So we've talked a little bit about the long term. On an annual process, we do. This is what you'll see, I guess, in the regulations booklet, or what your DPA designation is. So that is the map on the right hand side. Those yellow colors or blue colors are the kind of the lower opportunity areas, or bucks only antlerless permit area, specifically in the blue. And then those brown areas are either sex into the more, I guess, brightly colored areas of red, green, and purple, with increasing opportunity for those. But anyways, on an annual basis, the harvest, what drives us is a harvest-based model. So we estimate populations and density in relation to these goals that are articulating where we want to go. And what goes into this is, several biologic metrics, and then others, including, WSI, how that's affecting it, predators, and how that's affecting deer survival or mortality, recruitment, and then, of course, survival in general. And you've probably heard the phrase that all models are wrong, some models are useful. And that's certainly the case here. We're not in the disillusion that this model is perfect. As I mentioned, it's a harvest-based model. So in areas where we have more harvest, it performs better in those DPAs. In some of the DPAs where it's smaller or we have low harvest, it doesn't always perform as well, and there's pretty high error bars with that. But with that, we don't just take the harvest-based model. There's other factors that influence what we're setting for these bag limit designations, including raw harvest, those public input periods, so which were previously called deer open houses. I think they're called wildlife input sessions now, but we have those in March and August. The most recent was August 17th. And then just any calls throughout the year, whether that's to me or my boss, Barb Keller, who's the big game program leader, anybody in the big game program, or really anybody in DNR, those filter into us. Also, those area managers that you would likely talk about or talk to throughout the year, or those are your, in the field, on the ground contacts. They're taking those calls. Throughout the year, there's common themes coming in where we're hearing there's maybe depredation issues or low deer densities, some cases of high predation, or those types of things. And then, of course, with that, those area managers spend a lot of time in the field doing habitat improvement stuff or anything like that. So those are expert observations. We're meeting with them. So the big game program meets with them, meeting with the regional managers in these areas, all those area managers, and then tribal managers where it's applicable or there's tribal properties. So then with that, those area managers submit their recommendations of what they think that the bag limit designation should be, and trend, if we're trending towards that goal or at goal, all that's input into that. And then from there, there's a regional and big game approval process. So what we're looking for is that there's consistency with these goals. There's no outliers. And as similar with deer hunters in general, there's lots of opinions in I guess where they would like to see the deer population. And we certainly have that even with our own, DNR staff, whether that be me, in our area managers. We might have differences of opinions on deer populations or where they should be. We try to rely heavily on those area managers because I said they're on the ground. But we still want to meet that consistency and make sure we're trending towards those goals. And with that, once approval hits or goes past us, it goes to the Fish and Wildlife Director and then for commissioner approval. And again, they're seeing the same things, I guess, we are, and looking towards those consistency and making sure we're meeting those goals, and there aren't any bigger, higher level problems with those designations or with the goals in general. So as I had mentioned, these 2023 deer permit area designations, I wanted to show this map because you can really see, or this figure on the left, you can kind of see some of those themes coming out of what the DPA bag limit designations, and this dates back to 2013, and you can see the changes over time. And in general, there used to be a lot more lottery permit areas, so those blue areas, and then quite a big contingent of those yellow areas, which are the bucks only. And you can see specifically after 13 and 14, those areas growing because they were, or in 13 and 14, those were back-to-back hard winners, I believe, actually in 2012 and 13. So in that general vicinity, but you can see kind of some of those changes. And then just in general, you can pick out some of those themes in the, as I mentioned, that transition zone where we're going from coniferous forest to deciduous, or even onto the prairie or those ag lands where we're having high deer densities. You can see those brightly colored areas throughout the state. And then just in general, less lottery areas, which is great for hunters. It's one less deadline to meet, and it makes it a little bit easier when you're buying your hunting license. So just diving a little bit deeper into this. So you can probably pick out your DPA where you hunt and what those bag limit designations are. And with that, of course, you can see these in the regulations booklet, which the regulations booklet were delayed this year. So if you were looking for one, you probably weren't able to find one. But from what I'm told is they have arrived, and they'll be hitting the ELS vendors very shortly. So look out for those. You can pick them up and find that map, or of course you can find the map online as well. The interactive map is a great tool. So finding your DPA and what your bag limit is, but in general, I wanted to show that the bag limit changes kind of where they are this year, or where we are in the state, and again, those common themes. So decreases in some of the northeastern part, north central part of the state, where we've had, again, back-to-back severe winters. In some of those areas, very high snowfall totals. And then those increases, which is kind of been occurring, or we've been seeing in the last few years, but those areas in south central and southwestern Minnesota, where those deer populations are growing slowly, and really haven't been affected too greatly by snowfall totals or winter, in the past few years. So, but much of the state is a similar bag limit to previous years. And then just delving into a little bit more of a potential of why we're seeing some of these changes. As I've mentioned, there's a different predator base. So wolves are obviously very different from coyotes when we're in the northern part of the state to the southern part of the state. And then, bears and bobcats, or whatever else. There's a far different predator base in northern Minnesota. But with that, we've been trying to grow the deer populations, and the deer populations just have not responded like they have in the past. Also, part of that is habitat changes. But in general, this has been one of the snowiest decades on record. And you can see from this map that the past few years of where we've ended on the WSI map, or the Winter Severity Index map, there's lots of black and purple. That means that the winter was severe, those higher counts on the Winter Severity Index. And to I guess dive farther into this, we have the snow depth map in the middle. So that's inches of snow in those areas. And then the snow depth ranking. So that's a percentile at that particular moment. So I might have cherry picked a little bit from this is March 23rd, but really it's just to illustrate how much snow we actually had. And I believe in Duluth, it was the snowiest winter on record. So, and probably similar to other areas in northeastern Minnesota. And that carried on into April and even May in some areas. So that delayed spring green up is really affects deer when they're needing that nutritional quality, and they're not able to get it because the snow is still there. So it impacts survival in general. I guess I'll take a step back and just quickly visit the regional outlook. So I've kind of alluded to northeast and north central Minnesota. Some of those bag limit changes are decreased, and that's by design. So trying to provide actually or not provide as much opportunity to try to grow those populations. So some of those areas, it might be a pretty tough hunt just based on the back-to-back severe winters and less opportunity. That northwestern part of the state, it's probably maybe dependent locally on where you're hunting, but in general, there's some high, areas of high deer densities, others some of those populations are struggling. A lot of that is based on winter and also habitat in general. Those areas of the central part of the state, as I mentioned, there's really not a lot of shortage of deer in a lot of those areas. Some of the area managers who have been there for a long time are documenting the highest deer populations they've ever seen. They're getting a lot of deer depredation calls. So some pretty high deer populations in those areas. And with that provides a lot of opportunity there. And we talked a little bit about southwestern Minnesota, south central. Those populations have been slowly growing in the past few years, and with that comes some greater opportunity in those areas. And then just switching to southeast Minnesota, a traditional area of great deer habitat, some higher deer populations. There is, CWD is in that area, so there's still a lot of opportunity to harvest deer in those areas, and in general, pretty robust deer populations. In general, where we're falling for deer seasons. So as typically the archery season is mid-September to the end of December. Those firearms seasons, so the 16-day and the 100 series, November 4th to the 19th, the 200, the 9-day season, so mostly the rest of the state, the 4th to the 12th, and then within the blue areas, the 300 or 600 has a November 4th to the 12th. Then the B season, only in the 300 series, is again coinciding with that, usually right around the weekend before the Thanksgiving, but the third week in November, so the 18th to the 26th. And then muzzleloader, the 26th, or the November 25th to December 10th. These ones important to note, those youth seasons and then the early antlerless season were applicable. And you can see those pages designating where those are. Of course, the statewide youth season is open statewide. So October 19th to 22nd. But and then again, in areas where we have CWD concerns, or CWD in the wild deer population, the late CWD hunt. So you can see those DPAs listed, and that is planned for December 15th to the 17th. And I'll hit on this a couple times, but there has been no change to the shotgun and rifle boundary this year. That did not pass legislation this year. Again, just the overall look. We've kind of hit on some of this, but 12 deer permit areas, increased bag limits or lottery, antlerless lottery permits have increased. 38 DPAs have decreased or a decreased antlerless lottery permit. And again, some of that's by design to try to grow some of these deer populations in that area. And then, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the state has remained the same. So same opportunity or same DPA designation in a lot of those areas. And the important deadline to note, so September 7th, which is coming up quickly, get your antlerless lottery and special hunt applications in. So if you're buying a firearms or muzzleloader license, you're able to select that DPA you hunt in, and as long as you do it before September 7th, you're automatically entered into the antlerless lottery selection period. So, and then with those special hunts, as long as you're designating that special hunt, you're entered into that as well. So a map of where the early antlerless season is. So to be able to hunt during the early antlerless season of October 19th to 22nd, you must be in one of these 23 DPAs that's open to the early antlerless season. And Barb talked about this last year during the MOS session, but we went through a license simplification process, which there's no longer an early antlerless license that's needed. You can just use your regular base license, so any regular license, but you have to have the correct weapon type. But with a particular note that you can still buy the early antlerless permit, which is $8. So if you're There's specific instances where maybe that is great for you if you're in an area where you can't use a disease permit at $2.50 to use, if you're confident that you can fill those and want to harvest extra does during or antlerless deer during the antlerless season. Buy that $8 license instead of the $18 bonus permit. And again, in a specific case where the bonus permit is more, I guess, advantageous to people, is it's valid throughout the entire season versus that early antlerless permit, which is only valid during the early antlerless season. So if you're confident that you can fill them, buy that early antlerless permit. If you're not so confident and want the availability of the whole thing, buy the bonus permit. And then for those areas in the 600 series, those disease permit areas or the disease management areas, those disease permits at $2.50 are available for that time period as well. And then harvested deer don't count towards the statewide bag limit or the DPA bag limit. And one particular note, Whitewater Game Refuge and the surrounding DPA 644, which changed from 344 to 644 this year due to CWD positive detection near the boundary, is not open to the early end of the season, but the refuge is open to youth for the youth deer season. And switching over to what's new for the 2023 season. So Crossbows, this is probably the biggest change and what we fielded the most questions on. But Crossbows are legal for all with an archery license. So hunters will be asked at the registration if they harvested their deer using a vertical or crossbow. And also with that past legislation, we have a report due to the legislature October of 2025 of how this change has impacted the deer population. So we'll be doing some archery or deer hunter surveys to kind of tease out some of those things of how many people actually picked up a crossbow, kind of what the recruitment was, what harvest was, to see if we can identify any inconsistencies with registration and really delve into some of those changes of how it's affecting hunter behavior, hunt quality, harvest, all those things within that survey. So and one particular thing that I wanted to mention with that is I guess I've heard some concerns or questions of kind of why there's not a separate crossbow license, and just to, I guess, address that now. So with the legislation, this is kind of how it was laid out, and to stay true to what the legislation says is this is how we laid it out, so that anyone can use a crossbow with an archery license. With that legislation, that's how we wanted we have a few options of how to monitor that, but with that, to stay true to the legislation, we wanted the crossbow to be valid with an archery license. One other one that's had, I guess, a lot of questions or comments, the blaze orange on ground blinds on public lands, any fabric or synthetic blinds. So either on the top that's visible to all sides, or at least 144 square inches on each side. Muzzle loaders have changed definition, so they can be loaded at the muzzle, but charged from the breech. That's now legal. So some of those new technologies with the charges in muzzle loaders, that is now legal. And then non-toxic ammunition within the state park special hunts and then SNAs where hunting is allowed. You must use non-toxic ammunition. This was, there's an exemption for the youth deer special hunts in the shotgun zone only. So only in the shotgun zone where it's a youth deer hunt, but they need to still take out the full deer. So they cannot leave deer guts or the offal. They have to take everything out. And then with that, the main reason for this exemption is 20 gauge. Ammo availability within the shotgun zone is difficult, but it's even more difficult with 20 gauge ammo availability being extremely limited, and I guess very few brands that are producing non-toxic 20 gauge ammo. So that was the reasoning for the exemption. Another change, so a hunter who harvests an escaped captive deer or elk, so those elk or deer that are potentially tagged or are tagged, is not liable to the owner, but they must contact the DNR within 24 hours. That was not specific previously, but it is now. And then there was clarifications on the take and tag rules. So no adult party hunting on youth licenses. Youth must tag and take their own deer. Portable stands may be left overnight in certain WMAs in Northwest Minnesota. So those details, I wanted to put the descriptor, but it's pretty long. So you can see the map, and then there's details on page 109 in the regulations. And then, as mentioned before, the shotgun zone still is in place. Jumping to CWD. So I'll just briefly go down this by what zone they're in, I guess. So the management zones, mandatory sampling on opening weekend. So only opening weekend, November 4th and 5th, all deer 1 year of age or older. And these there'll be self-service sampling stations available the remainder of the firearm season. And carcass movement restrictions apply within all these yellow areas. So those CWD management areas are the yellow areas with the red around it. That's the carcass movement restriction boundary. So those 600 series down in southeastern Minnesota, the 605 in the metro, 604 up by Brainerd area, so on and so forth. You cannot take deer outside of those zones. And then just to note, those feeding and attractant bans may apply. They're not on a DPA basis, they're on county basis, because those feeding and attractant bans aren't specific to hunters. So a lot of people don't know what a deer permit area is, but they know what county they live in. So I guess you should be aware that there might be a feeding and attractant ban in place. I guess, and with that mandatory sampling, they will be staff stations that you can bring your deer to get tested at. So, and those are also in the regulations booklet of where those are, and you can find that on the CWD page online as well. In those surveillance areas, those are the gray areas surrounding the management zones. Again, mandatory sampling opening weekend, November 4th and 5th. And then again, that note that feeding and attractant bans may apply. Please check that map, which we'll talk about next, but it's based on county. And then anywhere outside of these zones, there's optional sampling if you would like to get your deer sampled. So through the partner sampling program, so those participating taxidermists, a few meat processors, and then even a couple sports shops are available to take those lymph nodes for you. And then they ship them to us, and we ship them to the lab. There's also a mail-in sampling kit. We'll also talk about that. And then you can make an appointment through your local area wildlife offices. So the mail-in sampling kit, the kits are free to hunters. We're making 10,000 of them this year, so there'll be 10,000 kits available. I believe that link is available live online now. So if you want one, you can still, I believe you can still get one. I'm not sure how many have been requested, but a first come, first served basis. And if you had a kit from 2022, those are still good to use. They're evergreen enough where all that's still the same information. So with these, the hunters collect the sample. So the hunter specifically is taking out the lymph nodes, recording that data, and then dropping the kit at a shipping vendor. So with that prepaid label in those instructions, it'll tell you everything you need to know, where you need to drop that off and how to collect that sample. There's also quite a few resources online, whether that's YouTube or even on the DNR CWD page of how to collect those lymph nodes. As I mentioned, you can request that kit online. You can also pick it up at a DNR area wildlife office. They have a subset of them, and then also some of the deer groups or other the conservation NGOs, Minnesota Conservation Federation, Bluffland Whitetails, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. Some of those groups have kits available to hand out. This is the recreational deer feeding and attractant ban that I mentioned. So it's a little more simplistic this year. There's not specific areas of no feeding or no feeding and attractants. It's all no feeding and no attractants. And these are the counties. Again, you can find this online and reference your specific county that you're hunting in. And again, not the same as the DPA boundaries, but county boundaries. In a specific note, there's also been confusion on this year with the changing of the feeding and attractant ban. Hunting over bait still remains illegal statewide. And now I'll kick it off to Grace, and she can talk about the Awful Wildlife Watching Project. And I would encourage everybody to participate, as it's a pretty cool opportunity. There's some really cool pictures and good citizen science opportunities. So.
All right, yeah, thank you very much. Again, my name is Grace Malinowski. I'm the coordinator of the Awful Wildlife Watching Project. And this is research with the University of Minnesota Extension Service. It's a participatory science project as well, and we are funded by the Minnesota Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund. So I'd like to tell you a little bit more about what we're doing and then invite you to join us. In case awful is an unfamiliar word to some folks, it refers to the internal organs of a butchered animal. So we are studying those discarded deer gut piles. The purpose of our research is really basic. We're just trying to better understand what and when species use hunter-provided deer gut piles by using remote cameras to capture images of the wildlife that are eating and visiting the gut piles. So how are we doing this? We are looking for deer hunter participants from throughout Minnesota who can commit to setting up a trail camera on the gut piles they leave after field dressing their deer. We ask that you leave the camera up for 1 complete month and then send us the photos afterwards. We have complete camera setups that we can loan out to prospective participants, and that includes a Browning trail cam, a case for the camera, a lock, the data cards, and the batteries. And we will cover shipping costs to get it to you both ways. If you have a camera of your own and you prefer to use that, that is very welcome too. You're welcome to participate with your own camera. So all you have to do is hunt as you normally do, set up your camera immediately after cleaning the deer so that you capture all the visitors that are visiting the gut pile. And the camera can be set up where you field dress your deer, or if you move the carcass to a different site to field dress it, you can put the camera there. Just please be aware of any sort of camera regulations that are in place for where you're putting it up. And then we'll ask you to fill out some brief online data forms throughout the project. One when you register to participate, one after you kill a deer and put the camera up, and then one after you retrieve your camera. I'd like to note that we will not ask you about the type of ammunition you're hunting with. That is not the focus of this research. And we do ask you to provide the location of where you're hunting and where the camera is, but we don't disclose that information publicly. So to participate, volunteers will need some basic tech experience, the ability to record the GPS coordinates of a camera, the ability to submit those online data forms, and then we upload photos through Google Drive. So Google Drive experience is helpful, but not necessarily required. We can work with you if that's unfamiliar to you. And then in exchange, we'll share all the interesting project results that we are finding. We can provide tech support from throughout your participation, and you get to see directly how your gut pile is used by wildlife. You're also contributing to important research that clarifies the impact of this human-provided food source for scavengers every year. And that could help answer a lot of important questions for wildlife management agencies about things like animal behavior and disease and contaminant exposure. I'll also mention that we use volunteers to help identify wildlife in the hundreds of thousands of photos that we collect. And that's on an online platform called Zooniverse. And there you can check out the project images we have and then help ID and classify wildlife in those images. It's free to register and join, but you also don't need to sign up or register if you just want to start, if you want to go on and just start classifying photos. So we'll share that link with folks here. And then lastly, to register as a hunter, if you'd like to participate, we would love to have more hunter participants this year. You can find detailed instructions and more procedures at our website, which is awful.umn.edu, which we will also share in the links here. So yeah, thank you for listening. Thanks to the DNR folks who allowed me to join today, and we hope to see a lot of your awful photos this year.
Outstanding presentations, guys. We are starting to get a few questions to come in, and I'll try and figure out who they're for. The first question I think is for Todd. Why is 113 and 701 blank on your maps?
Oh yeah, sorry, I should have probably touched on that. So I'm assuming those are referring to, which I can go back. Well, any map in general, but the deer population goals, I didn't touch on those. So 113 is Red Lake reservation. So that's Red Lake's jurisdiction. We're not in charge of deer populations on the Red Lake reservation. They're a sovereign nation. 182 is the Duluth metro area, and then 701 is the Twin Cities urban metro area. So typically we aren't setting goals within those DPAs based on the desired population outcome, which is to decrease populations within those areas due to high urban settings, deer human conflict, those types of things. So just in general, where those boundaries are drawn is just a reduced deer population and quite a bit of opportunity in those areas.
Okay. The next question is, has there been any new CWD findings in DPA 679?
Boy, I'd have to really rack my brain. There was none through I guess the last hunting season, but I do believe there was a one through the culling phase or this past winter, but I'd have to check on that. I apologize. It's hard to keep everything straight, but there was not during the hunting season. So
okay, I haven't heard anything either, and that's where I live and hunt.
Yeah, I know specifically, and that's kind of why it's maybe relaxed bag limit designation, as there's not a we didn't find another positive detection outside of city limits within that DPA. So in general, there was a good sampling rate and no CWD positive. So if I'm misremembering, if there was or wasn't one within city limits or a positive, it would be within city limits. So nothing expanding or radial expansion of CWD.
Okay. Jeff had a question here. He hunts in a 2 deer area. Are they both either sex? Or is it one buck or 2 does?
Yeah, so the statewide bag limit is 1 buck. So they could be 2 antlerless deer, or one could be 1 buck. So that statewide bag limit beyond those areas of the 600 series in southeastern Minnesota, with the exception of 644. Each of those DPAs are a buck per season. So a buck with your archery, buck with your firearms, and a buck with your muzzleloader license. Otherwise, in all the other areas, the statewide buck limit is 1. So in a 2 deer area, you could harvest a buck in an antlerless deer or 2 antlerless deer.
Okay. Grace, when do hunters take out the cameras into the woods?
Yeah, we encourage hunters to have it preset and take it with you when you are hunting, because we want the cameras to be set up immediately after you field dress your deer. We don't want to miss any visitor to those gut piles. So yeah, take it with you when you're hunting, put it up immediately after you field dress the deer. And we're looking for hunters from all hunting seasons.
Okay, very good. Has there been any discussion of using Ernebuck or antler point restrictions to increase the number of mature deer?
Yeah, there's been, we're currently within the big game program are working on a few different proposals to, balance or improve herd numbers, and then also buck to doe ratio. So I guess increasing that, which would be, mature deer, or the just herd health in general, really first step would be getting control of those populations in certain areas. If you're wanting to grow bigger bucks, you're needing to limit competition to those resources so they have plenty of nutrition. Seeing that nutrition is the leading factor for nutrition and age for bigger bucks. But so long answer to that is we are working on a few things. I wouldn't say it's specifically for older age class deer, but in general herd health, which is in turn would affect more mature bucks based on the outcomes or the goals that we're trying to achieve of reducing those densities in some of those areas and limiting competition, so increasing herd health.
Okay. Nick wants to know, how does the DNR balance moose and whitetail population goals? I hunt in 119.
Yep, it's definitely difficult in those areas to manage both species, but moose are a primary species of concern that I had mentioned previously. And with that, there's also federal and tribal lands up there. So we're taking a lot of factors into consideration when we're setting goals and bag limits on a yearly basis, and also taking input from the multiple partner agencies with those. In general, like I said, managing for moose is the primary species in those and primary moose range. So deer somewhat take a back seat in some of those areas, although we do take considerable comments and weigh those and do the best we can to also manage deer populations within there and provide opportunity. But with the moose plan, we do have a plan in place to limit deer densities in the core moose range in those areas. So
Very good. We got thank you from Ray, which is really nice to see. Next question is, how long do you leave the cameras in the woods? 1 month, I believe you said?
Yep, 1 month. We know that a lot of gut piles disappear before 1 month, but just having a set time allows us to standardize it for the research. And we're also interested in what happens, like if they get covered up with snow or ice and they don't get found for a while after they're put out there. So it's one complete month.
Okay. Hannah asked, I got a permit for the Grand Rapids City archery hunt. Are there any resources to find landowner opportunities that have nuisance deer that would allow me to hunt there? If I could fill my freezer and relieve someone of problem deer, that's a win-win. Plus the public land is fairly limited.
yeah, so currently we don't have like a landowner hunter connection website or anything like that, or database pointing hunters to those particular landowners. But it, depending on the DPA you hunt and if they're able to get a free landowner deer permit, they are listed on the agency website. So within the statute, there is a requirement that they allow some sort of public hunting, although that doesn't mean they have to say, yes, you can go. They may already have hunters there. So, but it is I guess, an opportunity to identify at least those landowners who are getting the free landowner tag. And then I would say you likely would have probably a better opportunity by contacting your county farm bureau or some of the farming groups. We actually just had a meeting with the Minnesota Soybean Growers Association in the recent weeks, and that was actually one of the ideas that they had, was creating a type of database connecting landowners potentially, so landowners and hunters. So I would say that they would be a good resource to contact as your local farm bureau or the farm union.
Yep, I think that's a good suggestion.
And Craig, sorry, I'm going to go back to one of the other questions that I didn't answer. The DPA 679, so there was not another positive. I just want to clarify that. Not another positive during, okay. I phoned a friend, so not during USDA or the hunting season. So
perfect. And the Grand Rapids City Hunt fits inside of 679, and it's a small area encompassing the Grand Rapids township boundaries. Let's see here. Ray came back with a question. Grace, is, in case I missed it, are you requesting photos or video pics? What do you want the camera set on?
Yeah, we have our protocols set up for photos. If you have the capability to take videos with your private camera, that would be really interesting to see. I'd say if someone has that capability, get in touch with us. Send us an email or give us a call and we can chat more about it.
And Ray came back with a suggestion for Hannah that maybe the Minnesota Deer Hunters Association would have some information on that. And MDHA has property within the Grand Rapids City Hunt. Their requirement is that you be a member of MDHA to hunt on their property. So that might be a win-win for you there.
Yeah, that being based out of Grand Rapids, that's a good suggestion. And I apologize for I just got the chat open, so now I'm reading that specifically, and I didn't realize, I missed that part, that it was specifically referencing Grand Rapids City Hunt. And so
Yep.
what I previously said about contacting landowners or farm bureaus might not be particularly practical for there, but within the city hunt, a good resource would also be the local police department. The contacts that we have would be private information. So I would say, for USDA calling or anything like that. So I would say that the local police department would likely be able to answer that question the best.
Okay. I don't see any new questions coming in, so we'll give the guys just a minute or so to maybe come up with one or two more. In the meantime, Todd, thank you so much for your presentation that you put together. Grace, I've been around your project for the last, what, did you say 2009 it started?
2018 was the first year.
18.
Yep.
And we've actually had some cameras put up on our Learn to Deer Hunt sites, which were pretty interesting. And I think they got some good information from that too.
Yeah, it's great. We're up to 50 species caught on camera now.
Wow. We got a big thank you from Kelly to Todd and Grace. Great information. So just let you guys know that Kelly reached out to thank you guys. And with that, I think we're gonna hope we got, nope, nothing new popped in. So with that, I think we'll have Cassie end the recording and move us back into the
Greg,
yes.
I just put in a plug that I'm available if there's follow-ups or if I didn't sufficiently answer anybody's question, please reach out to me. And I don't know if Benji, you want to put my email in the chat as well. Please reach out. I can follow up, or even if you disagree with one of my answers, we can definitely have a chat about that too. Or if there's any questions that you didn't have an opportunity or want to answer or ask, I can try to answer that as well. So I always welcome the public input. So.
Okay. So next week we are doing something a little bit different, a little bit special. We are going live from the Minnesota State Fair, and we will have a couple of roving reporters canvassing the DNR compound at the State Fair. We'll be talking live from the fish pond and the fish tanks inside the building and a few other spots, maybe a surprise interview with a very special bear. So tune in next week for live from the Minnesota State Fair. So Cassie,